Welcome to the Filmmaker Mixer podcast, the podcast by filmmakers for filmmakers.
This episode is sponsored by Gemini Crown Tech, software for all of your production needs. Stay tuned for more information later in the show. Hello, everybody. This is the Filmmaker Mixer podcast, and today we are chatting with director Pete Chatmon. Pete has directed many television episodes. He's done Yellowjackets, You, Chicago Fire. He also has a podcast called Let's Shoot with Pete Chatmon, which makes sense because this is Pete Chatmon. So, Pete, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me, Jeff. It's an honor.
Yeah, no, it's going to be fun. It's going to be really fun. So, I want to roll back first and talk about how you got into filmmaking and maybe what inspired you to become a filmmaker and a storyteller. How did that start for you?
I'll lead with it's all about access, whether it's from an educational perspective or just being put in front of the movies, And for me, I went to a high school in New Jersey, in Maplewood, New Jersey, Columbia High School, and we had the local public access TV station was in the school. We had a photography, department, which was a dark room.
Why the quotes? What?
Well, photography? Because it was one classroom, one dark room, but and then there was a filmmaking, department, which was again one Super 8 camera, prepaid mailers to a lab in Texas for the color film, and then we would develop the black and white stuff in school. And these were classes that most people kind of took as an opportunity to not have to do math or science or physical activity. So most people in there were kind of like, yeah, whatever. But I took it and I just really was drawn to it. And my high school teacher had gone to NYU Film School.
Oh, wow.
So with that, I joke, every anecdote began with when I was at NYU. So at that impressionable age, I said, well, what the hell is NYU? And I looked it up and I was like, oh, well, as I'm developing a taste for filmmakers, it was like Spike Lee, Scorsese, Oliver Stone. I was like, that looks like the place that I maybe should try to go. And that's where I applied, the only place I applied. And I went to NYU Film School for undergrad.
And so at that time, when you were in high school, I'm curious, did you have a sense of where you wanted to go as a filmmaker? I mean, were you interested in storytelling, interested in images? What was it that drew you to it?
I always knew I wanted to direct. And, as part of that, process, the moment you decide to be a filmmaker, you're an independent filmmaker. because nobody's going to be there to help you. So you start realizing all the new skills you have to develop. And the first one that I recognized was writing. I was like, no one's giving me a script. I have nothing to shoot if I don't come up with a scenario. I mean, oftentimes it was just like, what the hell are they doing in this quick silent movie? Like you had to come up with something. And I always knew that I would direct and I would have to write and produce and sometimes act in order to get there.
So what was the first thing you wrote as a high school student?
Oh man, I had my girlfriend at the time. There was it was some kind of, mystery about what was in this Gap bag. Like the clothing company was like the blue bag with the white letters, and it was being passed along from a bunch of different people, and there was a mystery of what was in it. And then, there was concern over where it was when somebody lost the bag. We made it a kind of like the Pulp Fiction suitcase, I might argue. And, I had enlisted her and her cousin and my best friend and, took my mom's car without asking to get some driving shots,
Hey, that's indie filmmaking. You got to take what you can and steal locations and
gotta do it.
Do you still have that somewhere?
I don't. It's funny.
Oh, no.
In this credenza behind me, I have an answer print of my thesis film at NYU that went to Sundance, a 16 millimeter answer print. I've got beta SPs right over here for my feature. And then I've got some Super 8 reels in a bag that who knows how I'll ever see them. I guess I could buy a Moviola, but
well, so How did you transition from being a film student, being a lover of film, and an independent filmmaker to
Yeah.
launching a career?
So when I graduated NYU, the kind of, I guess, North Star, if you want to direct, is making a thesis film. And so I made a short film, 24-minute short film called 3D. And that starred Kerry Washington, well before she was Kerry Washington, Dorian Missick, myself, Al Thompson, all folks who continue to work and whom I continue to work with, which is a big thing to communicate to the audience. Like, it's a long journey, and these ecosystems of relationships you have and you make are going to be, you're going to return to them again and again over a long enough timeline, provided you uh, don't burn bridges.
Right.
And yeah, so that short went to Sundance and 25 festivals around the world. Then I had watched a lot of my I'll say one thing. I'm very observant, and so I watched in the year ahead of me a lot of my counterparts do very well on the film festival circuit, and have incoming uh, people, incoming contacts saying like, "Hey, do you have a feature? Do you have this? Do you have
Right.
that?"
Right.
And I would watch them not have it, and I was like, "Not gonna do that. Absolutely not." So I had this script, and it wasn't that great, but it was a script. And I remember after about it, let's see, about 4 to 6 months after I was in Sundance, this woman from the Institute there, Lynn Auerbach, who's since passed away, had reached out and said, "Hey, we like your voice. Do you have a feature?" And I was like, "Of course I do." And it
As a
was
matter of
not
fact,
that
I
great.
do.
As a matter of fact, I do. Um, and I went through a bunch of rounds of notes and feedback from them, and they were ultimately not going to put it in their lab, but they introduced me to about 10 different producers in LA. And that was my first trip to LA from New Jersey to go have those meetings. And those didn't work out either, but it helped me realize like I was going to have to do this film on my own, film called Premium, which starred Zoe Saldana. So I've been very fortunate at catching people like right as at the beginning and as they're taking off. And yeah, I spent 5 years raising $520,000 to make that film.
Oh,
And
wow.
then we got a limited theatrical release. We did a Showtime cable premiere, and we were on Netflix back when you were like, you had your 3 DVD rotation.
Well, you mentioned two things I think that are really important for any young filmmakers who are listening. One, like you said, have a second project ready to go. A lot of people put all their energy and time into that first project, which makes sense because they're trying to make it as good as they can.
Right.
But if you're doing that to launch a career, you got to have a second or a third or a fourth idea ready to go. I think that was really smart. The other thing you mentioned about working with a lot of the same people, Andrew and I call it building your tribe. You do
Yeah.
meet people in film school, or if you don't go to film school and you're just out there doing your own films, you're going to meet people who want to act and want to be DPs and want to be writers. And you'll find yourself working with those same people again. And so, do you still continue to do that now that you're into the TV and doing things for,
Yeah. I
you
mean,
know?
it's such a, I tell, when folks, because, like I have a feature now that I'm developing. So I'm trying to get back into the feature director chair, because the TV industry does not know me as a feature director because I did all of these things by myself well before I got a job in TV. Um, but I'm always preaching the fact that it's an awareness game, it's a relationship game. I think it's the toughest part to swallow when you maybe come out of film school, or you know, you're driven by meritocracy, you know what I mean? And then you just really come to see like, you know, it's about who knows you and who you know. And then your job is to be clear about your voice, your vision, and how you fit into the industry, because then the who you know folks can actually be of assistance. But to think that the work stands on its own, it's a sad but true fact that it does not. It may for a few people, but if you go down the rabbit hole and pick 15 directors and read 15 biographies, you're going to find that it was a struggle, and it became about someone recognizing all this hard work they were doing at some point and then saying, okay, you've done 90%. Here's 2 more percent. Right? Like they're not even gonna give you the other 10. Here's 3.2%, you know?
A and 2 or 3 is good.
Yeah, exactly.
Take
And
it,
you
take
just
it.
keep going. So I don't know if I answered the question because I feel like I started losing the thread, but yeah, it was just kind of like, going from that short to the feature. It took about 6 years to do it, but like every step of the way, I just kind of had like, the next milestone in my sights. And if you do go to film school, I think it's important no matter where you go, but I'll say the challenge of doing that from film school is that you get used to like the semester by semester life, and then you graduate and like you just have death ahead of you. You know what I mean? So it's like you really it is valuable to be like, okay, let me write that feature, let me make that feature, let me, I always say make a documentary. Nobody can stop you at all from making a documentary. You just need a camera and you need access, but just make something so people know that you actually do this thing that you say you do.
Exactly. Exactly. How did you go from your first feature to being a working director in TV? What was that process like? Did you have to get a manager, agent? How did that work?
So the long story short of it was, yes, I did have to get a manager, Um, Premium, the feature came out, well, shot it in '05, premiered in '07. Then '08, I had a feature doc that came out about black tankers in World War II that Andre Brower narrated. '08, I also won this competition at Tribeca Film Institute for a heist screenplay I co-wrote, which is actually the one that's out now to actors. So what is this now? 16 years later, 17 years later? Wow. And then I was teaching at NYU. I was working at NYU. I had a production company. And, cut to 2014, I was really feeling like I wasn't about what I said I was about. Everything that I had last directed, it's 2014, so the last feature was 2008. I hadn't made a short or anything, and I'm like, I'm finding it more and more difficult to say that this is what I do.
Right.
And so I made a short. The production company got a deal for a nice campaign, and I was like, oh, I'm just going to take all my pay and I'm going to make a short. And I made this short film that ended up getting picked up by HBO. And so from there, I got on the radar of a lot of directing programs. I did like 2.5 to 3 years of like observing directors on TV sets and shadowing and whatnot.
Is that like an apprenticeship or what was that exactly?
It's basically, yeah, I mean, more or less, it's like, whether it's programs or like finding, you know, again, the relationship thing, right? Like there were shows where like, um, somebody would talk to somebody and be like, hey, we're not guaranteeing Pete an episode, but if he wants to come to Atlanta on his own dime, we'll have a chair for him.
Oh, wow.
You know what I mean? And so it's like, all right, I'll go to
There's that
Atlanta.
2% you were talking about.
There's that 2%, exactly. So it was a lot of that, but I got the manager off of the first program I was in 2015, where it was 15 directors in the program, and then 5 were selected to shadow on shows that studio produced. The studio was Sony, and when they did a press release for the 5 directors that had been selected to shadow, I got a bunch of phone calls from managers because they knew or felt like they could take that stamp of like, oh, here's someone who's been selected to watch another person direct, but we are earmarking them as someone that might be on the rise. That gives them a commodity to try and position and
Right.
sell, even though it took another 2.5, 3 years of meetings and just meeting over probably 250, 300 people in that time with all the general meetings I had. Then I ended up booking an episode of Blackish. That was the first show I booked. And ironically, I say this in my book, the creator of that show, Kenya Barris, I had met on my first trip to LA
Oh, how
back in
funny.
2002, when I went with my lead actor and we met up with his cousin and his cousin's good friend from college, and it was Kenya, and we were at a Fat Burger on Santa Monica Boulevard, and finally somebody knew me and knew all I had been doing, for 15 years when I showed up shadowing on Blackish. And that's the 10%, that's the 2%. So that helped close the gap on that.
Well, that makes me think of another thing because you were talking about relationships and also talking about the script that you're taking out. It's funny, a good relationship never goes away. It might go dormant for a while, but you do run into the same people eventually. And it's always good to be, on good terms with people, build those good relationships. And also good ideas never go away.
Right.
You get frustrated, you write a script and you're hoping if something will happen the next year, maybe 2 years, and then maybe it goes dormant, but 5 years later, 6 years later, if
Right.
it's a good idea, it can still come out and get out to the world in some way. I'm curious, speaking of writing, what kind of stuff are you drawn to as a writer?
Mm. I like, you know, I always I refer to it as a tone tightrope, or a dramedy,
Explain that. Yeah. What do you mean
you
exactly?
know. Like I like things take that challenge the audience as far as genre. So, and specifically I remember like watching Seven in what was that, 96, 90, I don't know, I don't remember the year specifically, but I remember even watching that movie at a younger age than now and being like, wow, this movie is like a buddy cop movie. It's a thriller, it's
A
psychological
little bit of
horror.
horror, a little bit of horror
It's
almost.
a little
Yeah.
bit of all those things, right?
Yeah.
And so you're watching like whether it's some handshake between the writer and the director deciding when they're gonna lean on what genre. And I feel like that's the only available real estate that's left to rejuvenate story, because
Interesting.
you've got revenge, you've got coming of age, you got love story, redemption, like whatever. There's only like 7 stories or whatever they say. So like that's like the opportunity to like do something new. And um in the TV work that I do, like this Yellow Jackets episode I just did, I mean it's
That's the one that's coming up, right?
yeah, that one came out on Friday and Sunday, because
Yeah.
streaming on Friday, linear on Sunday. But it's a mixture of like horror and drama, and there's comedy, and there's like action, and it's like all things rolled up into one, but driven by whatever the theme of the show or the script might be. And I really try and lean into that because overwhelmingly, like when I think about even events in my own life, like I remember, you know, falling up the stairs in high school during passing time in front of everybody and just hopping like 10 feet above my body and being like, this is funny. Like it's really it sucks right now and it's not going to be great for the reputation, but I can't divorce myself from the fact that this is funny to see.
Yeah.
And so like I feel like there's drama needs levity, and comedy needs drama to keep it real.
That's an interesting idea you're talking about in terms of blending genre tonally. I'm curious, as a writer and a filmmaker, how do you balance it in such a way that I think if you push too far in one direction,
Right.
then it lets the audience in on what you're doing because you want to keep it just hidden enough to where
Mm,
they're on the roller coaster, but they're not taking it as a comedy or taking it as a thriller. They're kind of in keeping
right.
a foot in both worlds. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
think that's a great question. That's super in tune. Like I feel like, I guess if what comes to mind in response to that is like, there's probably, a handful of moments in any script or any project where like the genre's telling you this is what you do.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then you can say, well, hold on a second. What if we do that? Just a little bit different. Or what if we do that? And you're not going to do that for every moment, right?
Right.
Because you still have to have like the meet cute, or you still have to have the cop still has to go in the bank at some point,
Yeah.
and see if people are alive and whatnot. But like, uh, but overwhelmingly, like you do have these opportunities where you can just sprinkle it in and then let the rubber band snap back to what people know. It's like this 85-15 rule, like 85% familiar, 15% a little bit different. And, even in thinking about Seven, I remember listening to a commentary and Fincher was like, I really just hate in all these movies when they're in a foot chase and it looks like they just know where to run. They know which way to go. And he's like, I made a point to not do that when they were chasing the spoiler alert, Kevin Spacey, you know. And I was like, yeah, like that's true. And I was watching, I was like, this felt a little more riveting and real because I felt that he did not know where the hell this guy went.
Interesting. Well, I want to pivot over to something else. Take the Yellow Jackets episode, for example, or any other episode you want to talk about.
Yeah.
When you're reading a script for an existing show,
Hmm.
obviously there's a tone that's been established by the premiere episode. What's your process, if you can explain what the process is, of how you decide to stay true to the tone of the show, but bring a little bit of Pete Chatmon in there?
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. That is often the battle of a certain kind of TV director because you always want to do something that is, going to be interesting. You have a way that you see things,
Right.
but you also want to keep it in line with the DNA of the show. So what I really try and do is like study what's come before. There's a lot of value that comes out of that. Like oftentimes, not oftentimes, but sometimes I'll watch early episodes of a show and then I'll talk to the showrunner or creator or whomever and be like, you guys used to do this thing and it doesn't seem to happen anymore. Like, why? And they might be like, wow, we did like that thing. We've just stepped away from it, but not by choice. And I'll be like, oh, okay. I'm gonna bring that back, or I'm gonna have my take on that thing that you're telling me you like and is true to the DNA of the show. And then I'm gonna find a way to like see the story through my eyes and your eyes at the same time. Um, that's kind of the job, like not to it's like a cinematographer too, like you don't want some DP that's like you can feel the yearning for a new reel in everything that they pitch to you. you
Yeah,
you, you know what I mean? It's like it's a disservice to the story and the creators to kind of come up and everything you say is like not in line with what the show has proven it wants to be.
makes sense. Makes sense. Well, before we wrap up, for people who want to follow you, follow your career, follow your podcast, how
Yeah.
do they track you down?
So I'm at Pete Chatmon, Chatmon on Instagram, on X, although I don't do much on X anymore. I am at Let's Shoot with Pete Chatmon on Instagram. And then obviously our podcast, Let's Shoot with Pete Chatmon, is on YouTube and Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everything and everywhere. um, but yeah, we're wrapping up season 6. We'll be back with season 7 a little bit later in the year, and it's a kind of it's the place I go to kind of keep me sustained while I'm in between projects, because I just love these creative conversations, much like this, where you just kind of get to vibe and talk about this thing we've all wanted to do with our lives for so long.
Well, very good. Well, Pete, it's been great to meet you. It's been great to chat with you. And yeah, stay in touch. We should circle back and talk again.
Yeah.
This has been fun.
Likewise. Good luck on that feature. I'm looking forward to hearing more and seeing more.
This episode is sponsored by Gemini Crown Tech, owned and operated by Stephanie Moore and Stephanie Harrison. We at Gemini Crown Tech have covered all your production management needs with our proprietary software. Please visit our website at www.geminicrowntech.com and use the code FMP for Filmmaker Mixer podcast listeners, so we know how you heard about us.
Thank you for listening to the Filmmaker Mixer podcast, a podcast created and hosted by filmmakers Jeff Stolen and Andrew Lamping, and produced by Melody Lopez.
Our theme song was composed by Stephen D. Bennett.
Make sure to follow or subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to us on, and stay tuned for future episodes.